you haven't guessed it already, camera A was the Sony and camera B was the Blackmagic. Now for those of you that are new here, my name is Reno and I'm a filmmaker and photographer based out of Ballito, South Africa. The methodology used in the blind test was as follows. We shot the Sony in S-Log3 and we shot the Blackmagic in RAW. In post, all that we did was we corrected the exposure and then applied the built-in color space transform settings that exist within DaVinci Resolve. So in this video, we are primarily looking at the difference in image quality between the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K and the Sony A7 IV. I'll also lightly touch on the features, the usability and the handling of the camera, as well as the different use cases that the cameras might be better suited for. The A7 IV features a 33 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor with the ability to shoot 4K video up until 60 frames per second at 10-bit color. The 4K 60 however is cropped to an APS-C size, and so you only get to use the full width of the sensor when you're shooting 4K 30. This camera has an advertised dynamic range of 15 stops, and the best way to tap into that is by shooting an S-Log3. The Pocket 4K has a 4/3 sensor, which I believe is 13 megapixels. It has the ability to shoot up to 4K 60 frames at 12-bit RAW and an advertised dynamic range of 13 stops with a dual native ISO of 400 and 3200. Let's take a look at some handheld footage shot on both of these cameras. First, you'll see the footage unstabilized, and then we'll see the footage stabilized in post. Now, having watched that, my personal opinion is the footage is fairly comparable. However, the Sony does have a slight edge, bearing in mind that it does have internal image stabilization. Both sets of footage were shot on image stabilized lenses. I do feel, however, that in a pinch, the Blackmagic footage gets by just fine. Next up, we're going to take a look at some dynamic range tests for these two cameras. Sony is advertised as having 2 extra stops of dynamic range, and I do feel that it shows in the footage. What I wanted to see next was how the 10-bit footage of the Sony held up to the 12-bit footage of the Blackmagic. What I noticed here was that both sets of footage could be graded to look very similar. The Sony could pass as Blackmagic footage and vice versa. When I took the footage to the extreme by color picking the face and the background and pushing those values around, it really didn't fall apart all that much, and so I feel that both sets of footage are really robust. At the end of the day, I do feel like I have enough latitude with the Sony's 10-bit footage. However, that 12-bit footage, in my opinion, gives a smoother gradient in terms of your color roll-off, particularly in the highlights, which I believe is what is creating that organic cinematic feel to the Blackmagic over the Sony, which seems to have more of a digital looking image. The following set of footage is a quick low light comparison between the two cameras. What I saw there is that the two sets of cameras hold up equally well between 1250 and 3200 ISO. I believe that the Sony might have an unadvertised dual gain that switches in at 3200 ISO, and at that point the Sony footage looks a lot better than the Blackmagic. Bear in mind that the Sony does have a full frame sensor, and I think that's where it's getting the advantage over the 4/3 sensor of the Blackmagic. This sensor also comes in handy when it comes to the depth of field, which is the next test we're going to be taking a look at. As you can see, the Sony is able to achieve a far shallower depth of field than the Blackmagic. Bear in mind that for this set of tests, the Blackmagic did not have a speed booster, and if we were to attach that, a shallower depth of field would be able to be achieved. When it comes to usability and handling, we need to consider the menu system. The Blackmagic has an iconic, super simple and intuitive menu system that I believe is one of the best on the market, and I would pick it any day of the week. The A7IV does have a much improved menu system compared to other cameras in the Alpha series. After a day or two of playing around, you do become fairly comfortable with that menu system, and it does offer you a lot of features. When it comes to focus, the Sony arguably has one of the best autofocus systems on the market. The Blackmagic, on the other hand, doesn't have the most reliable autofocus system. It could be used, but I wouldn't rely on it in a run and gun situation, and it would be more applicable for a stationary locked off shot where your subject isn't moving around a lot. Ultimately, the Blackmagic system, I believe, is better designed for use as a manual focus with phenomenal focus peaking, and the Sony also possesses these focus peaking features, which makes it usable as a manual focus lens and camera system as well. When it comes to ease of use, the Sony is probably an easier camera just to pick up and start shooting with. All you need is a lens and the internal battery, and you're good to go. With the Blackmagic, you at the very least need an external battery solution, as the internal battery is only going to last you about 25 to 30 minutes, whereas with the Sony I have shot in excess of 2 hours and not had a problem with the battery at all. Now, both of these cameras can be rigged to your heart's content using a cage. However, you're more likely to find the Blackmagic being utilized in this kind of setup because of the additional accessories you need in order to make the camera more functional, perhaps a follow focus motor, at the very least, as I mentioned, an external battery pack. When it comes to using these two cameras on a gimbal, I think the Sony definitely has the edge, as it's smaller, more compact, and fits on the gimbals quite easily. It also has a great autofocus system, as I've already mentioned, and that makes gimbal work a lot easier. The Blackmagic can be balanced on a gimbal, however, you're probably going to need to use some counterweights and a follow focus motor if you're trying to rack focus while you use it. If you're looking for a more pick up and go run and gun style camera, then I think the Sony is the right match for you. If you're happy building out a little bit of a rig and are comfortable in a manual focus environment, then I believe that the image quality that you're getting out of the Blackmagic at the price point is an absolute no-brainer. If there are any other areas of comparison between these two cameras that you would like for me to assess, let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video informative at all, I'd like to encourage you to consider subscribing to this channel as I continue to roll out similar styled content. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next one.